Hello, good morning. There's only two of us. Yay! That's great. So, oh, we've got non-video participants. I think we all need to get over ourselves and actually let the video be on. I don't care what your home looks like. In fact, I'm very curious to know what everybody's homes looks like. So I can go and go, oh, that's nice. Like Andrew's shelves. I'm like, oh, what's he got on his shelves? Maybe he's got something interesting about accountancy. I'm just saying. No. No. Good morning, everybody. Hi, Tori. Good. Got a good number on today. We've got about 45 people registered, which is good, because if we had, 450 registered, I really would be worrying that everybody was about to be made redundant. 43 is a good number to go through. We'll see how. There's Kathy. Hi, Kathy. Good morning. We'll just wait for everybody to get on, give them a few more seconds. And by the way, if you have children, this is probably the first time, it's certainly the first time for me, that I've managed to do both of them, pinch punch, first of the month, no returns, before they realised it was the 1st of May. Yay! Oh, it's been decades since I've been the first one to realise that. I'm just saying. And certainly the first one to actually do it, because usually they're up before me and they usually go, oh, we're so on top of it. And today, because they're teenagers and there's no school, I'm the one who's on top of it, so that's good. Yes, and then we've got May the 4th as well. May the 4th be with you. And when they're releasing the last Star Wars film, that would be good. Yeah, the Rise of Skywalker, which we watched 3 weeks ago. I'm a little bit behind the curve there. Never mind. But I thought it was very good, really good. So that's good. I won't give you any spoilers. So just so you know, so and so turns out to be so and so. Oh my God! There you go. Spoiler alert. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to go and talk about restructuring normally, and the restructuring in the time of furlough, how you need to adapt it. On the call today, we've got Tori, as usual, and bring Tori in to ask any questions. It would be great if we could try and stick on the restructuring questions and those type of things. But if there are the occasional furlough ones, we're happy to do those. But we're trying to stick on restructuring at the moment. I've also got my colleagues Julie on here somewhere on one of the pages, and Kathy. So they will be, I'll ask them to do stuff as well. Do stuff. They're like, what stuff? What are you asking me to do? Don't put me on the spot. Okay, so we're going to go through the PowerPoint. We've got a PowerPoint on this. If you write your questions in the chat, I'll come back to the chat, obviously, at the end when we've gone through. I'm going to say, as usual, listen to the PowerPoint presentation, make a note of your questions, but don't ask them until the end, because something you ask when I'm on the first slide might actually be answered on the 5th slide. Okay, so, and then we'll have to go over it again and again and again. Okay, so wrong, I've got to do the share screen. Okay, share. Good. Okay, so oops, come on. The first thing is, as always, you've got to know your numbers. You absolutely have to be on top of these. Obviously, you need to know what your numbers are to be able to know whether you're in trouble. Some of the questions from yesterday's Zoom call on this were people saying, well, I don't have any money to pay statutory redundancy pay. And I do appreciate that some businesses do live hand to mouth, but actually that is one of those rules of trading, that you need to be able to pay your staff what they're legally owed. It's like saying, well, I don't have the money to pay the VAT. Well, if you're charging it, you've got to pay it. So the fact that you've spend it on something else, like a hot tub in your garden, no, I'm sure nobody would do that. That's the other group that would do that, is not an excuse. So there isn't an easy answer, and we'll get to that later. But if you can't afford statutory redundancy pay, you probably need to be filing for voluntary insolvency or bankruptcy, because if you can't pay that, what else can you not be paying? Okay, so know your numbers, talk it through with your accountant. If your accountant's not being helpful, you need to change to Tori, who will be very helpful and has very reasonable rates. Although, every minute you delay, they double, don't they, Tori? They double every minute. So today we're talking about redundancy of fewer than 20 employees. The reason for that is if you have 20 plus employees that you want to make redundant, you have to follow stringent guidelines. Well, guidelines, they're not guidelines, you have to follow them. So, but you have a process you have to follow. So that would be, we'll do that differently. If anybody does have 20 plus to get rid of, just send us an email and we'll work with you on that one. This is for everybody who's getting rid of just a few people or might have to get rid of a few people. Okay, that's a much more straightforward process. So to avoid restructuring, the easiest way to do it is to get rid of all the people who are under 2 years service. There's no protection from unfair dismissal under 2 years. So you can just say, I'm giving you notice on grounds of redundancy, here's your notice period, off you go. Again, you need to be able to pay that notice period. Again, we did actually have a client who did live hand to mouth in the hospitality trade. They owned a chain of pubs in London. Or still do own a chain of pubs in London, but they didn't have the cash coming in to pay out those notice periods. So again, you need to be on top of your numbers to know what you can do on that. You don't have to do last in, first out. The only reason we say the 2 years is because it's the cheapest way of doing it. There's no claims coming back. You don't have to follow a process. But you also need to be thinking about, okay, I'm doing this to make sure the business survives. So who do I need in my business going forward who's going to make it a success? And it might be that it's the people over 2 years that you want to get rid of and not ones under 2 years. But again, you've got to look at the finances and see where that is and what you can afford. It's not compulsory to do that, but that's one way of doing it. If you have 0 hours people, you wouldn't necessarily need to put them on, make them redundant. You would just put them on 0 hours. So, and this is all, we're talking here after furlough as well as normally, if we ever get back to normally. But you would look at the ones who are going to be effectively the cheapest to parting company with them first, and then saying, okay, does that make a positive change to the finances? Yes, it does. Great. We don't need to make anybody else redundant, because everybody over 2 years are going to be more expensive to get rid of. Or actually that wasn't enough. We do need to now make another 2, 3, 4 people redundant. Okay. You do have to pay the notice period. Okay. If you could just make sure you're all on mute, that'd be great. Somebody did tell me how to do it yesterday on participants, but it's mute all. There we go. Mute all. Fine. Okay. So doing this is a notice period. So if you have a long notice period, and it doesn't often happen in the private sector, but there are examples of it, of people saying, well, I've got this new person on board, I really don't want them to leave because they're so fantastic, and they give them a 3-month notice period from day one, which we always advise against, and then sort of 6 months in they say, actually they're not very good, can I get rid of them? Absolutely, no problem at all, you just have to pay the 3 months notice period. And they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. Well, you shouldn't have given it to them in the first place, then, should you? That's why we said give them only a week's notice. So cuts both ways. If whatever is in their contract is the notice period. If they don't have a written contract, they have the statutory notice periods. So 1 week for every completed year of service. So up to 2 years, you only have to pay them 1 week. But it's whatever is longer. If it's longer in the contract, you have to pay them what's in the contract. Okay, and you can either make them work that, but if there's no work, which is why you make them redundant, that's a bit pointless. You can put them on gardening leave, or you can pay them in lieu of notice, which means you pay them out straight away, issue their P45 straight away, and they're gone. Okay, but we'll go through the advantages of doing those in a minute as well. Why would you restructure it? Now, the reasons that we have for helping people restructure, and these are the reasons that people give us, is why they want to do it. And this is in the order that they come to us with. One is that they've got a troublemaker. They've got somebody who's been with them over 2 years, sometimes a long time over 2 years. They've never really been managed. They've been in trouble from the beginning, but everybody's been a bit too afraid to deal with it. Now it's getting worse and worse and worse. This would be a great time to get rid of that troublemaker without making it personal, without actually having to sit down and say, you are a pain in the neck and we want to get rid of you. Okay, so the main reason we get asked to do restructuring is because there is a troublemaker in the team that they can't see any way of getting rid of otherwise. The other one is that there's somebody who's on long service and has had pay increases, has old terms and conditions which are far more generous than the current people, and they want to get them off of that. So they're not a troublemaker in themselves, but their terms and conditions are troubling, together with the contract terms. So there is no way of somebody who's doing long service and not, sorry, you can hear the dog in the background. He's very happy to go out for a walk before it rains. is that the long service and the contract terms, there's somebody there who's not a troublemaker, but they're not quite 100%. They're maybe 80% performance, but nothing bad enough that you would be able to do a performance disciplinary with them. So again, together with the contract terms, it's a good way to part company. It's an option to part company. And then the final reason people approach us is because of the financial situation, that they don't have the money. But like I said, without coronavirus, that is the order it comes in, and finances is right down at the bottom. It's always the top three. I would say 90% of the time, it's the top three of the reasons why we start doing restructuring for people. What do you need to have before you start? You need to have your organization chart, which I'm not asking you to do one of the huge corporate things. Even if you just write it down, you know, by hand on a piece of paper, what is the structure now? What do you want the structure to be? What jobs have you got now? What are the roles going forward? That it's that level. You don't even need to do it in PowerPoint. As long as you can take a picture and send it to us, then that is fine. But you're going to have to justify to people how there's going to be a change. And the easiest thing is to say, okay, well, we've got, I don't know, 5 managers. We actually want to have 3 managers with all the people underneath them. That is then a fair way going forward. And you also need to have, for the new jobs, you need to have job descriptions. It doesn't have to be long, you know, just half a page is fine, of what their tasks are. And then the terms and conditions. Again, it might be that you're putting people on lower salaries, fewer sick days, anything like that. What are the changes to the existing jobs if you're just tweaking it? If you're getting rid of people, then obviously there's not going to be, because you're going under, or you really don't want them, then there is no jobs for them to apply for. But that's what we do with the clients, is talk them through the situation, because usually there are jobs left and you need to be offering those to everybody who's there, so everybody gets put at risk of redundancy. Okay, so the process normally is that it's a 3 weeks consultation period. Now again, the whole thing about these things is that they are guidelines. It's a grey area. It just says in the ACAS guidelines a reasonable consultation period, which of course is why lawyers get rich. You need to bear in mind that most of UK employment law is defined by case law. So there'll be a law and then it will be interpreted. So the interpretation is, if you use 3 weeks, that has never been challenged as a fair consultation period. I did have one company come to me and say, we think a fair consultation period is 1 day. I'm like, yeah, well, it doesn't really matter what you think, because the court will not agree with you. Oh yeah, but I think that's perfectly fine. And they can see the writing on the wall and they'll go, and that's it. It's like, well, okay, yeah, I think you're on your own, to be honest, but good luck. So 3 weeks. If you're absolutely closing down, if you are going bankrupt, registering insolvency, then you could probably get away with 2 weeks, because there is no business going forward. But it's still, instantaneous is not considered fair, and actually nobody should be in the situation of having to do instantaneous, like, you're redundant, off you go, because we should all know our numbers. Again, coming back to story, we need to know the numbers so that we can prevent this happening, or at least keep the business going, even if we're having to get rid of a few people to make sure they keep going. The first step of the 3 week consultation period is a general meeting with all the staff who were affected. If you have a bigger company, you've got 2 or 3 departments, you would have, and only one department is at risk of redundancy, you would have one meeting with them, but ideally you'd have another senior manager talking to the other 2 departments at the same time, because you can bet by the afternoon, well, a couple of hours after the first meeting with the ones who are at risk of redundancy, they will have told everybody else about it, and everybody else will be waiting for their redundancy meeting. And unless you advise them officially that there isn't going to be a redundancy meeting, they'll all get worried and they'll start going off sick with stress. Okay, so you've got to manage your communication through this, but you need to have a general meeting with everybody who is affected, and then either on the same day or the next day you have individual meetings with those people. Julie, we don't mind which ones they are, do we? Whether it's the same day or the next day?
No, we're fine as long as you give them notice in writing that it can actually be the same day. That's not a problem.
Yeah. So and there are schools of thought for both. I prefer to do it the same day, because people are just need to ask questions. They need to have a bit more information before they go away and think about it. Or they need to have time to process it, and then you have that meeting the next day. So you've got, so either way is fine. it's not fine to do it more than 2 days later, and you should have the same people doing it consistently throughout. Okay. Those meetings are going to be 10-15 minutes each. And at those meetings, you'll have the details of all the jobs that are open for those people to take away the job descriptions and think about whether they want to apply for it. And they've got about a week to think about it. It's not on the spot. It's not the next day. They do have time to go away and think about it, talk to a legal advisor, not your legal advisor. They can go and talk to ACAS or CAB and decide what they want to do going forward. Okay. And at the general meeting, you need to be giving them out a letter. There are set letters that you have to give at each stage of the process to make sure that you've consulted and informed the people in full, and you're not saying anything foolish like you are redundant when actually we're just at the beginning of the consultation period. Okay. So in the first letter you give them, you'll be inviting them to the individual meeting, and at the individual meeting you'll be giving them details of the job descriptions of the jobs that are open and letting them go away and think about that. The next stage would be interviews for jobs. Again, this is the high level process. If there are no jobs, then obviously you wouldn't be doing the interviews, but you offer all the jobs to all the people, whether you think they are qualified or not. They have the chance to apply for them. You would then need to work on your criteria, just like as if you were hiring somebody from outside, to check whether they meet that criteria. And you may have to do a selection matrix as well. If there's one job and 4 people have applied for it and 4 people could theoretically do it, then we're going to have to go to the next stage, which I don't like doing because it's very, well, impersonal, which is giving people points on the selection criteria, so to see which one is the best. Okay, it's often, we don't often need to do that. It's generally really clear. 1 or 2 people want it. Of those 2 people, 1 is really qualified and suitable to do it, the other one isn't, and the others are interested and will go straight forward for a compulsory redundancy. Okay, if they don't get a job, then they would go to a final termination meeting where you give them all the details of their payout, their statutory redundancy payout, in writing, and then they would be paid what they're owed. Okay. For the meetings, you should record every meeting. We have in our letters that we say to them at each stage, we are going to record every meeting. You don't need to probably record the general meeting, but all the individual meetings should be recorded. Because our clients are around the country, we then can see what was actually said in the meeting and do any damage limitation that we need to do. Because it is, we coach people to make sure you say the right thing at the right time and you don't go into too much detail. So we had, unfortunately, one client where we coached them and said what they should do, what they should say, and they did that bit. And then the person they were making redundant said, oh yeah, but I still think it's a bit unfair. And then they went off script and said, oh yeah, but you know, you're getting on a bit, and I think we should really get a younger person in. I think it's like, and we're listening to this on the recording go, no, stop talking, stop talking. So we then had to do damage limitation so we could stop an age discrimination claim, which applies from the moment an advert is put in the paper. So once they're employed with you, they can sue you for discrimination. So it's to stay on script and not go off and try and be helpful by giving people more information, which actually is going to turn around and bite you. Okay. You can record your meeting on the phone. All phones have that option to record on the phone. They may object to recording. We haven't found anybody recently. We've been doing this for 7 years now, asking everybody to record, and we've only had it once, and that was a trade union rep who refused to be recorded. The person in the meeting was fine with being recorded, but the trade union rep didn't want to be recorded. It's, oh, for goodness sake. But usually it's not a problem as long as they can record it on their phone as well. And we would absolutely allow that. We do find that if stuff is recorded, people behave better because there is a recording. And 2, we can hear the tone of voice. And there's a difference between saying, oh, good morning, how are you? To, oh, good morning, how are you? Whole different world. So, and you don't get that through notes. And if you can't do the recording, then you could get a note taker in, but it needs to be somebody who will absolutely not get involved in the conversation in any way whatsoever. They should not start chipping in to either add details into a story because they work in the company, obviously, or that they understood something else. Oh yeah, but Bob said something else, and actually you should. They're supposed to be almost effectively deaf and dumb. They're just writing down what they hear. The problem with note takers is that they can miss stuff out, and they can be also asked to miss stuff out. So it's not as 100% accurate as a audio recording, which can then also be transcribed. So you have it word for word what was said. You would also have a record, like I said, of whether anybody started shouting or being rude. And we have had that before, because it's an extremely stressful situation that people feel that they were shouted at or that people were rude. And then you can actually listen to the audio and go, that there's no shouting, there's no rudeness. I know it wasn't what you wanted to hear, but there wasn't anything inappropriate in there. And you've got that audio recording to prove it, okay? You do have to provide notes to the individual afterwards, which is why the audio recording is good for a transcription, rather than you having to spend a lot of time at writing stuff up again, okay? The redundancy pool, one or many. So to be honest, the courts see if you only do one person in the redundancy pool, it is a little bit of a red flag to the courts, and they usually see that as potential, or strongly potential, unfair dismissal. It is possible, and we've done this, haven't we, Julie, that you can do that, but it's
we do it. We would prefer to avoid a pool of one, but there are ways of doing it. But it's a case of, if you were going to do that, we'd very much clearly look at your rationale, your organizational charts, really just to make sure it's a very thorough process, because you'd need to be extremely careful.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have got just one that you want to get rid of, then get in touch with us and we can talk through how we do that. I appreciate that it's because often people don't want to make the whole department unhappy by putting them at risk of redundancy, but the problem is you've got to balance it out. The risk to the business from a potential unfair dismissal claim, because you haven't put the whole department at risk, or that slight uncertainty, because they're going to be uncertain anyway if you get rid of their boss. If you get rid of the department manager, that's going to upset people anyway, generally, unless they're really awful, in which case, yay. So we tend to say we put as many people as you can into the redundancy pool and then go through the process really quickly, which is why we have the process and we work with our clients to keep you on process. So it only does take the 3 weeks, and it's not taking 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. That I know public sector takes that long for some reason. But we're trying to make this a 3-week, really slick, really informative process for the people to minimize the disruption, minimize the pain of it. It's not a pain-free thing, but it is, you can make it acceptable, okay? Again, we keep people on process. Employees obviously can do whatever they want. So the things they usually do if they're not happy with this process is they will go off sick, claiming stress or anxiety or depression. They may raise a grievance, or that's less likely. That is more likely, to be honest, if it's only one person. If there's only one person at risk of redundancy, they will raise a grievance. If it's a group, a department, it's unlikely there'll be a grievance. And they may even go straight to early conciliation, which is a step before a tribunal, to say that they're being unfairly dismissed. So there's things they can do there which can try to take you off the process, take up a 3-week process. We're used to all of those, so whatever they do, we can keep you on process and we can do it. The advantage we have at the moment, or also going forward, is that previously we were all into meetings. I had tried doing telephone meetings actually, and that went horribly wrong, so I was never going to do a telephone meeting again. The lady involved unfortunately just put the receiver down next to the telephone, didn't turn to cut us off, and then proceeded to rant in the background about how unfairly she was being treated, and obviously we couldn't do anything except put our phone down because we couldn't get through to her. She wasn't listening to us anymore. But what we have now, and everybody's got used to, are Zoom meetings. So even if somebody's at home and they say it's far too stressful to come into work to do this meeting, even when we're out of lockdown, we can still say, that's fine, we'll do a Zoom meeting. You can be at your home, your companion can be at their home, we'll be in the office, not a problem, we'll all do it on Zoom, and then we can do any meetings we need to do about sickness, about the process going forward. And the GPs used to, again, we don't know when the GPs are going to be back to doing sick notes, to be honest, but the GPs used to be willing to do a note saying that somebody wasn't fit to attend meetings, which meant obviously going outside their home. I don't think you'll find a GP will say you're not fit to have a Zoom meeting in the safety of your own home without anybody else there. I think they've got enough to do at the moment. But whatever the employees do to throw you off track and try and stop this process, we can deal with it, and we have dealt with it before. The cost of redundancy, this is what you need to put into your plan, is 3 weeks of consultation. They will be paid their normal salary for 3 weeks, which is subject to tax and NI. Okay. Then you've got to pay their notice period, which again is at their normal salary rate with tax and NI on it. You can pay them in lieu of notice. That is no longer tax-free. I think it changed 2-3 years ago. I don't know, Tori, do you know when that was? It certainly is gone. So if you have paid people before gross, you can't do that anymore. So pylon, you have to pay them holiday, and you have to pay them any time off in lieu that if you're working on a time off in lieu basis. So if you put them on gardening leave, you can get them to take their holiday during that gardening leave, and you can get them to take time off in lieu during that gardening leave. If you're doing pylon, you have to pay out any accrued holiday that's not taken, and you have to pay out any time off in lieu. Okay, so it's usually more beneficial to put them on gardening leave. And then you've got the statutory redundancy pay. So it's 1 week's pay, or for every completed year of service, or £538 a week capped, whichever is the lower amount. Okay, so this is where you need, again, to get, like you've just done for furlough, effectively, what is their weekly amount? How much would I have to pay them? The statutory redundancy pay is tax-free, so you're saving employer contributions on that, but there is a weighting. So it is ballpark, 1 week for every year of service, up to a maximum of 12 weeks. But if they were 41 or over while they were working for you, there is a weighting of 1.5 times that. And if they were under 21, I think it is, there's only half that. So what we always use is the government calculator. There, the links at the bottom, calculate your redundancy pay. If you just Google redundancy calculator, the government calculator will come up near the top of that page. That's the one that you put it in, and it tells you exactly how much money they should be getting, and then you know how much you need to allow for. So it's 3 weeks salary, notice period, whatever that is, which is up to a maximum of 12 weeks, so 1 week for every year of service, or whatever is in your contract, so whatever is longer, and then the statutory redundancy pay. So for somebody who's been with you, 12 plus years, you're looking at half a year's pay if you make them redundant easily, possibly more. And that's when people start saying, well, we don't have the money to do that. Okay, there's not very many options other than registering for insolvency or doing something that is totally illegal, which is firing them and then just waiting for the tribunal claim to come in and paying it at some point in the future, because you can't make, well, you could try and negotiate with them to take less money, but it is their money that they are owed for long service to your business. So easing the process. Okay, so you can offer voluntary redundancy. We're back to knowing your numbers. How much cash do you have to ease this process? So you can offer them a signing bonus if they volunteer for it, an extra month's pay. You're going to have to offer them more than they would get if they were made compulsory redundant. You can't just offer them what they were doing anyway, because they're going to get that anyway. They're entitled to that. But an extra signing bonus, you can remove the cap from the weekly pay and pay them what they are actually paid per week if they're in the higher earning bracket, or you can pay them up to the cap if they wouldn't have normally got that. So you can add that. You need to remember, though, that a voluntary redundancy is still counted as a termination by the employer, but it's so it is still a potential unfair dismissal claim. Although we haven't had many of those, have we, Julie, with the voluntary redundancies?
No, most employees, if they put their hand up for voluntary redundancy, wish to leave for different reasons, and potentially they might have another job to go to, so they don't usually then claim for unfair dismissal.
Yeah, exactly. So, and often we found that people have actually got another job lined up as soon as the process started. They were looking for another job. They get this cash in hand, they go, they start the new job, they've got the money to build the extension on their house or go on a nice holiday. So we haven't had any problems with that. But you do need to be aware it would still count as an unfair dismissal claim if you did it the wrong way. And if it does go really pear-shaped, you can still do a settlement agreement. Settlement agreement, you would have to, is ballpark a minimum, again, of what you would pay them from a statutory redundancy process, plus extra on top, because you're asking them to give up their rights to sue you, and you have to give them money for that. So again, it's not the cheapest way of doing it, but it could be the quickest way of doing it if people are being difficult. Okay. Right, furlough and the process. So there's our piles of cash going down as we go through. It's now till the end of June. It was extended because the big companies would have had to have started giving notice. They have to give 45 days consultation period if they're going to make over 100 people redundant. And that's what the government wanted to avoid at this stage. So they've postponed that now until mid-May. Mid-May again will be the decision whether the government extends furlough. The feeling at the moment from the barristers is that it won't be extended. Who knows? We'll see how it changes. And as we all know, it can change from day to day. In fact, even within a day, it can change. But at the moment, there is no indication that it's going to be extended past the end of June, and that even in for industries where there will be problems, hospitality, food and beverage industries, it's then, I think the feeling at the moment is the government is willing to take the hit in that area, if you see what I mean, that they're willing for it to not be great for those industries, and that they feel that they can cope. But who knows? I mean, that's 2 months away. We've got no idea what's going to happen, considering what's happened in the last month, to be honest. The biggest thing is going to be lockdown. Again, we're waiting for end of next week to know what's going to happen with lockdown. Again, the feeling is that there will be a gradual release. Some industries will be able to go back quite quickly. I think I was reading one of the South American, was it Brazil? I'm not sure. They released people from lockdown who were who did astrology readings that they were allowed to do, and fortune tellers were allowed out of lockdown. I'm like, that's interesting. Well, at least they could foresee their own illness, so that's fine. But we don't know which industries they're going to be. It's going to be the ones probably that are going to find it easiest to do social distancing, and obviously everybody's in a different boat with that. At the moment, you're paying 80%, if you've got staff on furlough, that you're paying 80% of their salary to them, or if you're able to, you're paying up 100%, okay? You can do most of the process during this, okay? So if you have the figures and you know that there's going to be a problem, you could actually do the consultation process and most, if not all, of the notice process during furlough. So the government will be paying 80% of the salary. During the consultation process, you only need to continue paying that 80%, but for the notice period, you need to pay them at 100% of their salary, okay? But you are only then paying them the 20% top up, or however much it is. But you're getting 80% back from the government. That's going to be the cheapest notice period you will ever have had, because you're not paying most of it. The statutory redundancy pay is all yours. You absolutely do need to have the money for that, but you could time it so that you can do all the rest of the process and get it finished by the end of June. So if you do want to do that, get in touch with us now and we can get that sorted, because it's either a 3-week or a 2-week. Like I said, it's 2 weeks is not good, 3 weeks is better, but we'll be needing to start that at the latest 2nd week in May, to make sure that notice periods, if they've got a month's notice period, that finishes before the end of June, and then you're out of pocket. My feeling would always be that you try and hold on for as long as possible, but with the business head on, as opposed to, and ethical, nice person head on, which obviously I don't put on very much. I'm HR. We just do the business stuff. But the business stuff is that actually for the business, it would be better to do it while people are on furlough rather than waiting until they come back and going, actually, there's no work for you. Okay. But like I said, the statutory redundancy pay is all yours. You can't claim that back in any way. Process communication during furlough is just being a bit more creative. Obviously, you can't have everybody into the office to do a general meeting, but you could get everybody on a Zoom call to do that meeting. It does feel a little bit impersonal, but you've got to work with what you have. We're all used to Zoom calls now. So you have the general meeting on Zoom call, and then you would be sending emails out to the people involved saying, okay, you're going to have a meeting at 2 o'clock this afternoon, and then you'd have a separate one with them, and you can obviously time emails to go out so they go out while you are talking to them. Okay, so you don't have to worry that they're going to miss that. So you've got Zoom. You can, if they don't have Zoom, and some people don't on their phones, or more mature members of the employees, then you can do normal telephone. You can send the letters that you need to send out by email to them. You should have all their private email addresses. They shouldn't be logging into their work email addresses. And you can do it by snail post. That is the least preferred because it takes the longest. But if you do that, you need to do the guaranteed next day delivery, which is the expensive one, which is about £6 per letter, because that is the only one that Royal Mail guarantees will actually be signed for by the person. If it just says signed for, our local postie was trying to be helpful, and he said, oh yes, your neighbour 2 doors up, she wasn't in, so I knew she'd be in later, so I just signed for her and put it through her door, which negates the whole point of the process. But they don't do that if it's guaranteed next day delivery. So if you're going to do letters, that is what they're doing. I have heard actually today, and I don't know whether it's for all mail deliveries, but my economist says that actually the Royal Mail are no longer going to be doing Saturday deliveries because of restrictions of personnel. They don't have to do that. So I'm like, so you may well have a problem with the timings if they start cutting down deliveries. I don't know whether anybody else has said that, but I was just a bit shocked. I was very glad that I signed up for the digital version of The Economist this week, because I probably won't get it for days and days and days. But there are other ways of doing it. You don't have to do semaphore, but there are other things you can be using to talk to people rather than face-to-face. Face-to-face would absolutely be the best. But if we're not allowed to do that, Zoom, telephone, email, letter, there are ways of getting the message across. You don't need to not do it just because we can't do it face-to-face. Okay, and then we've got useful links at the end there. So I'll stop the sharing. Bing. Okay. And the chat is empty. Have I managed to sort of just delete everybody's questions? Have you got any questions on that? I know it's clear as mud. It's only when you start doing one of these processes that you then go, okay, no, what was I supposed to be doing now? And they've said this, and how should I react and everything? So if any of you do want to do this process, then do get in touch with us, because we can get you through the process. You don't have to become a retained client. It would be, we can do this on a project basis, but it's, you don't want to do this bit wrong, because you're doing this to protect your business, to make sure the business continues. If you do it wrong, you're going to end up with an unfair dismissal claim, you know, 6-12 months down the line, when you think you're okay again, and you might have to be paying a year's pay with a 25% uplift if you haven't followed the right procedure. So that's what you need to be thinking about with this. And then and what you also need to be, we had an interesting call with a golf club, that they were approaching it kind of from the wrong side. And you know, every business is different, but they were saying, okay, we want to make people redundant, so how can we form our account so that it looks like we have to make people redundant? And it's like, well, no, surely your accounts are saying you have to make people redundant, not the other way. They're like, yeah, but we want to make people redundant no matter what. No matter how good the accounts look, we want to use this situation to get rid of deadwood. So, which is what I said, sort of troublemakers, contract terms, long service, those people they want to get rid of. So he was asking us questions. That we're going into the creative accounting realm of how can I phrase this and how can I put that? And this is where we came back to, you've got to log the furlough money as revenue, okay? And you've got to log, isn't that right, Tori, and any grants you get as well. So, so you've got to have that all logged as revenue. I'm not saying you can't make people redundant, but I'm just saying if you're going to say it's because of finances and it actually gets to a tribunal, they will have requested copies of your financial statements. And if your financial statements say because of furlough and grants that you actually were making a profit, then there's going to be more difficulty justifying it as a fair dismissal. A restructuring for business grounds to make it effective going forward, that's absolutely fine. That's not then because of the finances, that's because the situation has now changed. We're not out of lockdown for food and beverage, therefore we need to restructure going forward. That is something different to the accounts are so bad we have to get rid of people. That's the thing. So you just got to think it through a little bit if you're going to do this, to make sure you're clear on why you're doing it, because also when you're talking to people, and you will need to talk to the people, you need to come across, and this sounds very cynical, but you need to come across as believable. You need to believe what you're saying, and to do it in an appropriate way, so that they feel it sounds awful. It is awful being made redundant, it absolutely is, but the way you can make it better is to be confident and to not faff and to not make it about you. I was made redundant a long time ago now, about 20 years ago, and the boss called me and said, oh, it's the worst day of my life. I'm like, oh, what's happened? And he's like, well, I have to make you redundant. Okay, no, it's the worst day of my life, not yours. You've still got your job. And he was in tears. He was in tears. He's always awful. It's like, oh my God, just stop making it about you. It is awful to do this. I've been on both sides, but it is much worse to be made redundant than to make people redundant. Much, much worse, because people have got bills to pay. They don't know at the moment whether they're going to get a new job. And that is also a concern, because if there are no jobs or fewer jobs out there, then it's more likely that people are going to start a claim against you on the off chance they get some more money to keep them going. If there are plenty of jobs out there, the likelihood of a claim is a lot lower, because people just say, oh, stuff it, I'm going to go and get something new. And if they've got a new job, then there's no loss. And any court would say, actually, you don't get any compensation for the loss, but you might get compensation for the process. But people won't go through that if it's not really worth it for them. But if there's no jobs for them to go into, they're more likely to try it on. And there will be ambulance chasers out there waiting for people to start these claims, and they will up their advertising. As soon as we're out of lockdown, they will be upping their advertising for people who want to make a claim, and they will be helping them. And they will be adding in things like discrimination, age discrimination, gender discrimination, any of the discriminations. They will just add it in, because in discrimination, you are guilty until you prove yourself innocent. And it's really difficult to prove a negative. So they will just add that in, because then it's unlimited against you. So what I'm saying is, if you're going under anyway, fine, you can do whatever you want, because you're not going to be around to deal with it. But if you intend to keep trading, you need to be doing this the right way, so that you don't get bitten by it 6 months, 12 months down the line. Okay, right, let's have a look at the chat. Whoops. So Angela, I have an employee that has resigned. Can I claim her last month's pay as furlough still? Yeah, sorry, yes. Sorry, I'm just trying to work out what you quite meant. Yeah, if she is still sort of employed by you, she's still in a notice period, we still have furlough till the end of June. You can claim that last month's pay as furlough. Now, she's resigned, so this is a question really for Julie. If they've resigned, we wouldn't normally pay them 100%, would we?
No, we'd usually pay them 80%, but what I'd make sure you do is you write to her to say that obviously you're paying her furlough, but that her resignation date still applies. So her, I presume maybe she might have been ending, say, end of April, but you're going to keep her going now for another month of furlough or something. So you would actually write to her to say that her resignation still applies, but we've just extended it so she can still claim furlough.
Yeah, so it's
a question, Angela.
Yeah, so if you give them notice, you have to pay them 100%, but if they give you notice, it's only the furlough amount. Okay. Carl Nelson, can you enforce contract restrictions like not going to competitors? Well, okay, I've got some bad news for you there, Carl. You can't generally enforce contract restrictions ever, okay, because the courts don't like people being restricted from earning a living. And if particularly the more specialized you are, the less likely they are to enforce restrictions at a court level. Okay, that doesn't mean you can't send nasty letters and cease and desist letters from solicitors. You can do that until, you know, you've run out of money, really. Like I said, the lawyers always get rich on this. You'd have to prove a loss. You would have to prove a loss if they went to a competitor, and most people can't do that. That is just, well, they might, this other client might have come to us, but they might not have. Yeah, well, if you can't prove it black and white, the courts aren't interested anyway. The biggest thing about restrictions actually is more that, for example, salespeople take data with them and start talking to those clients and do marketing sales to them. The successful prosecutions in the last 2 years have been under data breaches, GDPR data breach. If you then report these people, those salespeople, to the ICO will prosecute them on your behalf. Yay, quids in. So that's the best way to do it. You'd not, particularly at the moment, because of the situation, you would find you wouldn't get a court to enforce the restrictions. And being realistic now, the courts are doing Zoom calls or the equivalent of Zoom calls to do hearings. You're talking about something 12, 18, 24 months down the line. It's not going to make any difference now. So you just need to make sure you're being realistic in that. Okay. Andrew, with a normal consultation meeting, can we restrict attendees, but on Zoom, others can be lurking in the background, listening in and possibly prompting questions? Okay, so the general meeting, you wouldn't give them a heads up that it was a general meeting. You just say, we've got an update to how things are going on in the business on Monday, 9 o'clock on Zoom. We'd like everybody to log in, please. You'd then make a note. Somebody on that call in senior management would make a note of who had actually logged in. Okay, so that you know who you need to be ringing up by telephone or sending an email to afterwards because they didn't attend. At that point, they would find it difficult to have anybody like a trade union rep or an employment lawyer in the background, because they're not going to be able to get anybody at short notice. You're getting them on the call and say, right, I've got really bad news, I'm really sorry, the finances are down, we're going to have to restructure, so I'm just putting you, all of this department is risk of redundancy. It's not a long conversation. They won't have time to get anybody who wasn't already in the room with them, you see. And then for the individual consultation meetings, they are absolutely allowed somebody who is either a colleague or a trade union rep. Okay, and because they can have it being done remotely, that person doesn't have to be in their house. That can be done. We haven't had, maybe you have a different experience, Andrew. We haven't had any problems with any of the Zoom calls we've been doing for the past month in HR with unauthorized people being on them particularly. But it's not a problem if they do prompt questions, because then we'll either say, yes, that's a relevant question, or it isn't. And worst case, we can say, okay, we need to start this again when you don't have that person in the background and you've got the recording. You would always record a Zoom call, and you would be able to then say, look, we tried to do this, but they had unauthorized people on there. So I don't see it as a major problem, and I'm not sure what questions they would have. That we expect people to have difficult questions. We don't expect them to go, oh, okay then. I've never had anybody go, oh, okay then. Apart from, I lie, apart from this one company, private sector, who I went in to do a redundancy process, and I came in, I wasn't looking forward to it because I really liked the team, and they were all being shut down because they've been bought by a corporate. And came in, I said, oh, so how are you doing then? Expect them to go, oh, it's really awful. And they went, great. I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah, we just won the lottery. No. And like, yeah, they just all won the lottery. They had a group of them together, or everybody in the company except one person, God, were they sick. One person had won £41,000 each, tax-free, and they'd found out the previous day before I started the redundancy consultation. So the payout from the corporate was very generous anyway, and they had £41,000 on top of it. It was the easiest, happiest process I've ever done for anything, actually. Even more happy than hiring people. It was just, oh, it was just so lovely. Everybody talking about what they're going to do with their 41,000 going on holiday. So, but that is an exception, obviously, unless I can sort of tweak the lottery to pay out everybody that we make redundant. That'd be nice. But we expect difficult questions. So whether they come from the person or whether they come from somebody else, it's not usually a problem. It'll be fine.
They also, to that point, they have notification of each meeting, so they know in advance, so they can ask the friend, the partner, the lawyer for the difficult questions in advance anyhow. So I wouldn't be too worried about somebody lurking in the background with the difficult questions. It's, they can get them regardless of a Zoom call.
Yeah, exactly. So Nancy's asking, what if the people have been made redundant? Can you furlough them during the redundancy period? Okay, so they're working at the moment, is that right, Nancy? And then you're going to do the 3-week consultation with them face to face, and then put them, or do you want to furlough them during the consultation period, and then could you? Okay, and then furlough them, or just furlough them during the notice period? I don't know. So I think you could. I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I was assuming, to be honest, and that's maybe wrong, that we would be getting rid of people who were already on furlough, because there wouldn't be any business for them to come back to, as opposed to people who are still working. Because if they're still working, there's probably still work for them to be done. So what? So yeah. So maybe if we have a chat about that, Nancy. Okay. My employee claims she is entitled to 100% pay for her last month. Of course she does. So can I claim the 80% to make it up to 100% so she does not feel aggrieved? Do we need, you're right, she wouldn't feel aggrieved. I don't know how much we need to worry about her feelings given that she has given you notice. But yes, you could claim the 80% and make it up to 100% so that she's not annoyed. Julie?
Yeah, I think so. I think, yeah.
Yeah.
She could try and bring a claim, but it's not going to happen for months and months and months, maybe even 18 months.
Yeah.
And at the most, then you'd have to pay the extra 20% if she was successful. I don't think she would be, but yeah, you might just want to just pay it now.
Yeah, exactly. And the accrued holiday. So if I don't know how much holiday she has. We've had this in the other furlough calls, is you can put them on holiday during their notice period, or during furlough. So if they've got 5 days left to take, you give them 10 days notice. So if she's got a month's notice, I don't know, to the end of May now, maybe, you can make sure that she takes all of that holiday during that month. Okay, then you wouldn't have to pay out anything else. And you can do that as an employer. You can put people on holiday, so there would be no need to pay out the accrued holiday. If you don't put her on holiday, you absolutely would have to pay out the accrued holiday, and you'd have to pay it 100%, wouldn't you, Julie?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So the cheapest way to do it is make sure that she's put on holiday during furlough, so that you get 80% back from the government and you're only paying the 20%, because the holiday does still need to be paid at 100%. It's just while she's on furlough and you're claiming back that 80%, you're only paying that 20% top up. Okay. The other thing about tribunal cases is that when you're hiring people, so people go through redundancy and then business picks up and they're like, oh, I actually do need somebody back in that role. The question is usually, how long is it before I can hire somebody without a risk of a claim? Now, we used to work on 4 months. So they have to do early consultation, which is then a month, usually lasts a month, and then you've got another 3 months to do a tribunal. Okay, so usually 4 months. However, there was already a backlog on tribunal claims before we went into coronavirus. So people were submitting claims, and it was taking 6 weeks to get from the electronic, I can't speak, I need more coffee, electronic submission through to the employer being advised that they had a claim against them. 6 weeks. So what we're working on now is, if you've not heard anything, no claims have come through within 6 months of you terminating them, you're probably fine. Okay, anything less than that, if you hire somebody else and that person found out about it and you didn't offer it to them, they could claim that it was an unfair dismissal because it wasn't a redundancy, because you got the job back. It's unlikely. I don't see it's hugely high risk. But it is a possibility. But if you leave 6 months, then you'll be fine. Okay, it used to be 4 months, now we're saying 6 months, just to be on the safe side. It might go up if there's longer queues at early conciliation and tribunals, which there are bound to be. Everybody is behaving themselves now. I'm sure the claims at early conciliation have gone down at the moment, because quite a lot of people are at home doing nothing, so why would they do a claim? But as soon as we're out of lockdown and certainly out of furlough, that's when the claims will go through the roof. And that's when there's going to be a huge problem. And then the fact that it's free of charge is going to count against the system. Unfortunately, I think it's a good thing to have the system and make it accessible to everybody, but only if you can deal with a number of cases and the system does not have the resources to deal with the cases, because obviously it's government funded and the government didn't see it as a priority. So, Catherine. Can you change the role drastically, e.g. serving drinks in the bar to preparing food in the kitchen for takeaways? You can ask them. You can't unilaterally change anything. So you can say, would you go and do this instead of that, because I haven't got a role. You can do this as an informal chat and say, look, I don't have anything in the bar, but could you do that, same salary, same hours, in the kitchen, would you be happy to do that until further notice? And they might say yes, great, sorted. You would just back that up with an email confirming that they'd agreed to this. And if they say no, then that's when you might need to do a redundancy process. Okay, so you can't unilaterally change it ever. You always have to consult, but then it's, if they agree, it doesn't have to be a formal process. If they agree, that's great. If they don't agree, that's when it needs to get more formal. Okay. Just the notice period. I need to read what Nancy Hibbert saying. Can you? Yeah, just the notice period. You absolutely can furlough them just through the notice period. That's fine. John, in the redundancy process and selection, are we able to offer changes to the contract of employment? Something like, we're looking to reduce hours, we're prepared to accept this. Yes, you absolutely can ask people if they're willing to accept it. Again, you need to consult with them. And if they say no, then you'd need to go through a redundancy process. Okay. Assuming that we're able to discuss review with managers of potential redundancy candidates in advance of advising potential redundancy candidate. Yes, that's how, yeah, absolutely, you can do that. Just be aware that you need to make sure that they don't leak anything. Actually, the private sector aren't usually a problem. Golf clubs, it's usually committees that leak like a sieve. So you absolutely would be talking to managers about what needs to be, who's going to stay, who isn't going to stay, and all of that in advance of starting the process. Okay, not just advising the potential redundancy, but in advance of starting the process, that you're looking at who you need, how many people you need in that role in the business. They can express a preference for who it would be, but the thing is that it's not just the manager's preference that is the basis. It's the legal situation. Who is the least risk to get rid of? Who can we do without it? There's a lot of factors there. So yes, get their feedback, but it's not going to be the overwhelming requirement there. Okay, good. Okay, gosh, the time's flown. I was thinking it was sort of past. It's almost the hour. If you do, after this, go away and then about half an hour go, oh, I should have asked that question, absolutely send us an email. We'll be happy to help as much as we can. We'd love to have any of you who aren't clients so far on as clients, and we can have those conversations as well. But if we can help you as much as we can before we get to that stage, we're absolutely happy to help. The PowerPoint I used this morning is already, or should already be, up on the website. Kathy, maybe if you could put the link to the website in the chat again, that'd be great. And then I'm going to put this video up as well. If you are going to be doing redundancy and there's more than just one of you who needs to know what to do, if you get them to watch this video as well, that should answer most of their initial questions. And then if you do need help, we're obviously happy to help if you then contact us. But what we are saying is that everybody who is involved in that process, you know, management process, needs to have seen the video and looked at the PowerPoint slides before they call us, so that we're not going over old ground over and over again with people asking beginners questions. Okay. And Julie, is there anything else to add at the moment? No?
No.
No, that's fine. Tori, is there anything you would like to add? No, it's just making sure that you do the right payments, that furlough is taxable, grants are taxable. Unfortunately, I didn't like that one. I didn't like it when Tori said that last week, that the that the grant for rate relief might be taxable. No, but you are earning from the furlough. You're not having to pay people, so that will affect people's finances as well. So look at those, see where you are, and then talk to me.
Can I jump in on that one quickly, Caroline? If you are using Xero and you've got furlough and grant payments, we've done a couple of little videos to show you how to put that into the right place in your accounts if you're doing your own bookkeeping. So we can, I'll share it on my social media, but if anybody needs to know how to do that quickly, just drop me a note and I'll make sure that you put it in the right place so that you don't, by mistake, forget when you get to the end of your financial year that you've got to pay tax on that stuff.
By mistake. I like that phrasing. Yes. So Tori, where can they find you on social media?
So Panthera Accounting. So it's either LinkedIn. You'll find me under Tori Wag. Pretty easy to find there. And on Facebook, we've got Panthera Accounting page. So come and like our page, and we can chat from there. Okay, lovely, good. Well, thank you very much, everybody. We won't see you next week because it's bank holiday. Yay! Because how is that different from any other day? Except there's no emails coming in. Yes, so that's good. But we will be doing one in 2 weeks' time. If there is a particular subject anybody would like us to cover, as opposed to me just choosing something, then please send us an email and we'll go over that. It'll probably be a wrap-up of lockdown changes, furlough changes, anything else that's come through as well, and any restructuring questions, so fine. But we will do this again in 2 weeks. So I hope you have a lovely weekend and a lovely next week. Goodbye. Thank you.